What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We're here with some more PGA DFS picks and lineup advice for DraftKings and FanDuel. This time for the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am out there in Pebble Beach. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, and I'm joined by fellow six-figure PGA DFS winner and our analyst at Occupy Fantasy, Niromada, back after his 1 week vacation. Niro, welcome back, man. What's up? How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. It's good to be back. Good to be back with everyone who's listening. And let me tell you, I feel like I ran hot last week avoiding the tournament. So that was great, actually. I mean, I don't take pleasure in anyone else's pain, but when I saw the leaderboards and I was into the weekend, I was like, ooh, I would have gotten smushed. So glad I wasn't there for that.
Absolute carnage last week at Torrey Pines. And if you're new to these videos, welcome. What we're going to do here today, we will review last week's plays. We love transparency and loving to see if we can learn anything from the previous week. So we'll talk about what our model and our plug spit out, plus anything we can learn from how that tournament played out. We will talk about the top plays in our data model for this week's Pebble Beach tournament. We'll give you a reminder of lineup construction for no cut events because this is a signature event, an elevated event, whatever you want to call it. There will be no cut this weekend. This goes back to the century, back in the first week of January. A little reminder on how we should build lineups for this type of event. We'll talk about the players we expect to be popular or more popular in high stakes contests and smaller GPPs. And then we'll give you some early market movers and maybe a showdown tip with another course rotation on tap. So Nero, you were on vacation last week, and as I said, absolute carnage because it may have been the lowest 6 out of 6 and lowest 5 out of 6 rate I have ever seen in PGA DFS. Just 1% of lineups got all 6 golfers through the cut, and just around 10% got 5 out of 6. Normally that number is 20% or higher. So I know you weren't as tuned in last week because you were on vacation, but what can we take away when we see something like that happen?
Yeah, well, I first of all, I agree with you. I can hardly remember more than a small number of times where I saw the 5 of 6 percentage, either at 10% or right below it. Just crazy. I think one thing that people forget is when they go to the multi-course rotations and it's a full field. So this week, right, multi-course, but not a full field. But when it's multi-course and it's a full field, and that allows them to get like more than usual in at probably 156, 160 some odd golfers, whatever the final total was. And again, you got to remember, we usually only see those type of events in the dead middle of the summer when the daylight is the longest, and that allows them to expand the field size a little bit. Just organically, you're going to have lower 6 of 6 and 5 of 6 rates because the field is bigger. But you throw in the weather, which was a little unexpected from what I read, and the fact that on Friday the North Course actually played harder than the South Course due to the wind for the first time ever in the history of the tournament. They had to stop with a wind delay. So you throw in the wind, all the extra golf. I mean, it's just so much variance on top of variance on top of variance. Like that's how you'll get situations like that where those percentages are super low.
Yeah, and when the weather is unexpected, it requires different skill sets than what we initially anticipated going into the tournament. So if we look at our Occupy model last week, some decent hits, I would say, all things considered. Number one in the model was JJ Spawn, and he finished T15. Nero, if I told you that you had a guy that you put in most of your lineups and he finished T15 last week, you would be ecstatic.
Oh, 100%. I would be so excited because I'm guessing last week you could have cashed with a 3 of 6 if you had the right three in there, and Spawn at 15th would have absolutely helped you in that endeavor.
Yeah, number three was Ludwig Aubert. He finished T42, tumbled down the leaderboard Friday and beyond after battling with the flu. And that was another piece of variance added to the equation last week where we had multiple guys drop out pre-lock. One guy dropped out post-lock, thank you, Gary Woodland. And he alone at 15% ownership caused that 5 of 6 and 6 out of 6 number to plummet. So if you got Oberg across, that was actually pretty helpful. Sung J M, he was number 4 on our model. He finished tied for 4th, which was fantastic. Number 7 was Charlie Hoffman, kind of a greatest hits list from the model so far this year. He finished top 25. Andrew Novak at number 10. If you multi-entered and got in Andrew Novak, he finished 3rd in the tournament. And then number 16 on our model was Sam Stevens, who finished 2nd. So actually not too bad on a tough week. And Nero, you called Sepp Straka in the plug 2 weeks ago as the winner. I took over last week and had Harris English in the plug. Talked about him on this show as an early market mover. He won. So if you had Harris English, you had some of these other model guys, you could have avoided, even with a 4 out of 6, some of the chaos and gotten near the top of some GPPs.
Yeah, I would think that you would had a pretty good week. I mean, honestly, if you just would have been over the field on the top 10 plays in the model, I would have I would think that your worst that you would have done is around break even, given the low rates of 6 to 6 and 5 to 6. I would have thought you would have had a decent week. And if you mix and match that with a little bit of the plug and Harris English, like you could have had a really good week. And we've talked about it before, but that's really what I'm trying to do, right? I'm trying to marry some of my subjective stuff that I believe in and that has been profitable and successful for me in the past with the model, which sees things that I can't see and has the ability to forecast in ways that I don't forecast. And every week I'm trying to do a mix of what I like and write up in the plug with what the model has, and try to put lineups together based on that.
Absolutely. So let's look at this week's model for Pebble Beach. I'll give you the top 7 or 8 names. Nero, I'll throw out the name. You tell me why they might be a good fit for this course or this event this week. Number one, if you've been a member of OccupyFantasy.com or you've been watching these videos all year, first, 4 weeks of the season, number one shouldn't be a surprise. It might be a surprise to you new viewers, but it's Keith Mitchell, who has been a great course fit so far this year. Has made all the cuts that we've asked of him. Nero, why is Pebble another good course fit for him?
Yeah, Kashmir Keith right up near the top. Again, I think he's had very good ball striking stats for 2025, and guys who are very good ball strikers tend to come to the top in models like this because again, it's the most forecastable skill. So, it's no surprise to see Keith, near the top. You apply a little bit of subjective there, maybe not the best putter, tends to run hot and cold. Course history okay at Pebble, but not amazing. He's got a 4th and a 12th in 2023 and 2022. He was 54th last year when, again, it was reduced to 3 rounds. But yeah, no problem being on Keith Mitchell this week.
Next, we have Scotty Scheffler, who we must talk about because he saved our bankrolls for the first 3 weeks just by purely not playing in the events. But now he's back, Nero, coming off a hand injury, a minor surgery. The biggest question, obviously, right? He's going to be number one in any model, top of the model, anytime he plays. Number one in wedges, which is important at this course. Number one in ball striking, number one birdie making, you name it. Every course is a good fit for Scotty Scheffler. The biggest question I have to ask of you is, how high or low do we see his ownership in this event, given that it's a no-cut event? And is this the one time where we can take some variance into account with him coming off the injury? It's going to be a balance, I think, between looking at what his ownership says versus the risk we could take with him coming back.
Yeah, well, my golf results improved quite a bit last year when I stopped trying to find reasons to not play Scotty in my player pool or to be under the field on him. So, I'm probably not the best person to ask. I'll put a plug in for the plug and say that he's expected to be interviewed today by the press. So I'm waiting for the transcripts to get released. So I'll be putting a lot of stock actually in what he says about himself, how much he's been able to play. The early reports were he basically put a club in his hand for the first time, like late last week, early this week, and hadn't done that since before Christmas. So, again, we look for reasons to fade high ownership. If he's got high ownership, and it is true that he hadn't really picked up a club until this week, he's obviously still Scotty, and he could just smoke this field. But we look for reasons to fade ownership or to get under ownership in sports like golf, and that would be a reason why. So look out in the plug. I'll definitely put a update in there on what his press conference sounded like.
If you want the reason to play him, I think it was Dan Rappaport tweeted today that he was talking to Shane Lowry, and both Shane and Scotty Scheffler were playing Spyglass today. And he said when he had talked to Shane, he was either playing ahead of or behind Scotty. And he said at that point, Scotty was 6 under through 6 on Spyglass in his practice round. So
yeah, sounds right. By the way, as my caveat was, my results got way better last year when I stopped trying to be like under on Scotty and find reasons to fade him.
absolutely. All right, let's talk about number 3 in the model, last year's winner, Wyndham Clark. Putted his mind out of his mind last year to win that event. But was it fluky last year, Nero, with just the putting, or was he actually this good of a fit as what the model is telling us?
Well, you got to remember he shot 60 in the third round after shooting 72, 67 in the first two rounds. And then they called the tournament. So he didn't have to follow up like an insanely low round, which again is if you follow PGA, it's very, very hard to do. So it definitely a little bit fluky, but as he proved in US Open and other things, obviously, top flight type of player. He has a 18th place finish here in 2020, and then his other two starts he missed the cut. So, and again, that's when it was a 54 hole cut with the bigger pro am, bigger fields, that kind of thing. So, yeah. And his ball striking honestly wasn't that great in his other two starts this year. So definitely some questions with Clark. He'd be someone I would look at his ownership. If it's low, I'd probably get over the field. If it's going to be high, I'd probably be under.
Fair enough. Next, we have Hideki, who won the Century earlier in the season in the first no-cut event of the year, but then tumbled down the leaderboard this past Sunday. Model likes him, number 4. Anything particular stand out about Hideki as to why he might be a good fit at Pebble?
Yeah, well, yeah, he shot 76, like you mentioned on Sunday at the Farmers. That's what caused him to drop down. But you look at so he was second in the Dunlop Phoenix in November. He won the Century. Then he was 16th at the Sony Open, and then he was set to finish a lot better than the 32nd. He finished at the Farmers, but shot the 76 on Sunday. His course history here is he's honestly actually only played here twice. He played the U.S. Open in 2019 and he played last year because it's a signature event. So I don't think that the pro am format is Hideki's jam. So no surprise that he's wasn't very interested in playing here. So you've got the negative of the course stuff, but the positive is how well he's been playing recently. And you just look at his stats last week. The reason why he finished where he did, he was 46 in strokes gained putting, strokes gained approach first, strokes gained tee to green seventh. So he's still continuing to strike the ball well. Like I think he's probably someone I'd want to be a little bit over the field on until his ball striking starts to tail off.
And as I talked about in this video last week, these West Coast POA greens are extremely tricky to putt on. Takes a lot of experience sometimes. So oftentimes we can marry course history or West Coast history in putting, and Hideki not having that could be a sign of concern. Whereas the next guy in our model, and he finished 4th last week, was Sung J M, who is top 10 in this field in West Coast POA putting. And there are a couple other guys in the top 8 or 9 of our model, Nero, that feel that way. I don't know if you have you ever putted on that surface, or for maybe you can explain a little better than I may have last week as to why this particular surface is so tricky and why we care about experience on this type of green more than say other courses in the United States.
So first of all, it's a little bit unique. Like a pure POA surface is a little bit unique. You really only see it in California and like the Pacific Northwest. You don't see it as much. You see some POA blends in other places, definitely like in the Midwest, but not anywhere on the East Coast or the Southeast. So number one, it limits the number of guys who grew up putting on POA, and any golfer is going to be more comfortable on whatever surface he grew up putting on. POA, because of the way the grass grows, tends to grow. Maybe it's like towards the sun or something in the afternoon, but anyway, it gets bumpy in from the grass growth and from footprints and people walking on. So it's not a grass that handles like heavy traffic all that well. So in the afternoon, it tends to get bumpy, and it's bumpy anyway a little bit, not like the smoothest. Um, it's very smooth in the morning, not the smoothest later in the day. So it can be tricky. You need that experience, and sometimes better particular putting style like Brandt Snedeker's kind of quick putting style where the ball has a lot of acceleration coming off the face tends to do better in that type of environment because it holds the ground better. So all that aside, the reasons why you want to play Sung Jae when you look at his stats recently, everywhere he is in the strokes gained stuff, like if I look at I go all the way back to August, his tee to green stats outside the American Express where he missed the cut because he shot 77 on the first day. Strokes gained tee to green, fourth at the Farmers, fourth at the Century, 13th at the Zozo, fifth at the Tour Championship, seventh at the BMW. So that's strokes gained tee to green. So
Now you add
you're
in
not going to get much better than Sungjae in that.
exactly. And then you add in his West Coast POA putting. That's a cherry
Yep.
on top. Next, some other guys who fit that bill are Colin Morikawa, who should be plenty popular this week, and then Tom Hoagie, who is also top three in this entire field in his proficiency with wedges, and he's kind of a course specialist too, in the fact that he's won here before. So Colin Morikawa, Tom Hoagie, two other guys that fit that bill, Nero.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other two that would get in the wedge game would be Spawn and Lowry. So Pebble, shorter, a bit of a shorter course. You tend to have some more wedges there than you might have other places. So someone like Spawn or Lowry, who's really near the top of those wedge charts and accuracy, can do very well here.
So if you guys have liked how Nero breaks down what is seen in our model, make sure you check out our daily plug at occupyfantasy.com, where he gives all kinds of nuggets like this, gives his top plays and his player pool for an event, course breakdowns, weather breakdowns, lineup construction tips, everything you need in a written format from a PGA expert. So make sure you check that out at occupyfantasy.com. Link is in the description below. That is normally posted Tuesday evenings or Wednesday mornings. Now, speaking of lineup construction, let's move on and let's just remind people, Nero, if they want to, they can go back and watch our Century video where we went in depth on this topic. You will also go in depth in this topic in the daily plug. But as a high level reminder, what should people be doing with their DraftKings lineups when we have an event where there is no cut, and historically this type of construction gets you to the top of the leaderboard more often?
Yeah, I again another plug for the plug. I do a little bit more in depth of large field and small field lineup construction strategy that will be in the plug. But again, high level. Got to remember, there's only 80 golfers in this event, so ownership gets condensed, and it gets a little higher for not everybody, but there's just less players to take up ownership. So what I like to focus on using at least one golfer under 15% owned, two to three under 20%, which would include the one golfer who's under 15%. And I usually want to have one, at least one, we'll say 6K golfer. So 6K in the DraftKings pricing. And that's it. If you just follow those rules, your lineup will have a chance in a larger field GPP.
And just if you can follow the intuition, it makes sense. But for someone who's just like, why do we have to play a 6K golfer? Those are typically the worst golfers in the field. Why do I have to include one of those guys? Nero, right? It's because that allows you to fit an extra stud in your lineup. And when there's no cut, you're guaranteed 4 rounds out of even the worst golfer in the field. If I was playing this event, I would still get 4 rounds. So everyone gets 4 rounds here, and that's why you can punt at least one of those final spots.
Yeah, that's the thing is the cheap in these smaller field signature events, the cheap golfers just simply do not hurt you as much as they do in a full field event because the reason why they're cheap in the full field events is because there's a high risk of them missing the cut and you miss out on 2 days of fantasy scoring from that golfer. The pricing scheme doesn't change, so it's still the same pricing. But these 6K golfers down at the bottom, number one, they're much better than your standard 6K golfer that you would have in a full field event. So that alone makes a pretty big difference. And number two, unless they withdraw, like you're guaranteed to get 4 rounds of fantasy scoring. So there just simply isn't the same level of risk. The floor is higher and they have a higher ceiling because the 6K golfer in this event is much better than the 6K golfer was last week at Torrey Pines.
That's for damn sure. All right, now if we like this segment and people will the viewers have liked this segment as well. If we look at industry projections, who do we expect to be more popular than our ownership projections indicate? We'll start with DraftKings. And Nero, I like to tell people if you're playing high stakes, these are guys you can expect to maybe go underweight on just because they're going to be more popular than they probably should be. But it's also advice to those of you who don't have access to our model or any projections and you're playing $3 or less contests with no pros, that you could probably just play a lot of these guys and you'll end up on top for the most part over the course of the season. So it depends on the type of contest you're playing. But Nero, who's on DraftKings this week that we expect to see more ownership than any ownership projections might indicate?
Yeah, first two guys would be no surprise because we talked about them up above, and they're two of the best ball strikers on tour, and that's Scotty Scheffler and Sung J M. So anyone that has outstanding ball striking stats is going to be have bumps in the high stakes because so many high stakes players are very dependent on model simulation systems that really value the ball striking. By the way, they should because it's the most predictable skill, and I'd say long term, it's the best one of the best ways to approach trying to win money in PGA DFS. Other ones I have four other ones listed for DK: Lee Hodges, Lanto Griffin, Justin Thomas, and Mackenzie Hughes.
JT and Mackenzie Hughes. JT, really quickly, we haven't talked about him yet, and I've seen some buzz around his name so far. First of all, this year, but this event especially. What are your quick thoughts on JT this event?
Yeah. Uh, I think he's someone that I was high on coming into the year. Second at the American Express again, he'd be another player like wind the clock back to the Tour Championship. Here's his last four finishes: second, 26th, second, and seventh. Right. So playing well. He hit the ball, really well all around at the American Express, and he was sixth here last year. Hideki Matsuyama, though, someone who always just ignored this event previously, partially because grew up in Florida, so he grew up on Bermuda, did not grow up playing POA, but clearly he can play. He can play here. He's playing well this year, and I can see why he would be popular selection this week.
Now, on FanDuel, we don't want to forget about you, FanDuel folks. Scheffler obviously will be popular, more popular over here as well. But the rest of the list, aside from Scheffler and Sungjae, are a little bit different because of the pricing. Who on FanDuel, and again, this is for high dollar stuff, really small GPPs, not necessarily the larger contests. The larger contests pretty much always mirror our projected ownership. It's these smaller 500 players or less contests where we get these ownership bumps. Nero, who on FanDuel fits the bill?
Yeah, sorry, one correction. I said Lanto Griffin for the DraftKings thing. I meant Ben Griffin.
Ah, yes.
So one correction there for everyone, so I don't get murdered in the comments. First one, Scheffler for sure, just because he is who he is. Then I have Højgaard, so that's Rasmus Højgaard, who I talked about actually in one of the first videos this year when we were talking about players coming over from new tours for the PGA Tour this year. Ben On, Sung J M, again, there's three of those four just amazing ball strikers. And then Robert McIntyre and last week's second place finisher, Sam Stevens.
Interesting. Very interesting group of guys there. And again, four of those guys are in the 8 to 9K range. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in smaller, low dollar contests if you're looking just to jam some of these guys into your lineup. All right. Now, as I said last week, it's still too early for us to have accurate ownership information. That'll continue to get updated in our model and our lineup builder through Thursday morning. So in order to figure out which are the popular cheap players we should be fading or pivoting away from, make sure you check back to our model and in our daily plug for that kind of strategy. Early market movers. We had Harris English on this list last week while you were gone, Nero, and that was a huge hit. Only one is catching my eyes so far this week. It's fellow Maryland guy, Denny McCarthy. And Nero, talk about West Coast POA putting, he might be the best in the entire field at it. So not just us, someone, this is what I said last week about Harris, someone out there, someone somewhere is picking up on something. And they're picking up on Denny this week.
Yeah, so Denny's one of the best putters around. So I think his stats are probably good on all surfaces. But if you believe that POA might be a little bit more difficult to putt on than your average putting surface, then it would make sense that highly skilled putters might come to the top more often on events with POA. It's definitely not universally true, but I could see a world where you could use that. You could use that reasoning. He also has very good course history here. So his last four starts, or his last three starts here in his last 3 years here, 26th, 4th, and 12th. So good course history. You have a skill set that fits what you're looking for. I can see the reason for the early steam.
And we would love those results at just 7K on DraftKings. Finally, we'll close out the show. I want to get your take because, as we mentioned at the top, this is a course rotation. 3 of the 4 days will be played at Pebble Beach, but one of the days, whether it's Thursday or Friday, will be played on Spyglass. Similar to last week where they played Torrey Pine North for one of the days, they'll do that this week for Spyglass. And again, like you said, Nero, last week's wind really threw everything out of the equation. On Thursday, I said in this video, I said in the plug, play the North Course guys in Showdown exclusively. That worked tremendously well, as it should have, on Thursday. And then the weather threw everything off, and it made everything wacky on Friday. But is there any particular edge for courses or weather or days that we can see for Showdown for this particular tournament?
Yeah, it's definitely not as pronounced as it is with the North and South course at Torrey. Both courses are similar. They're a little bit over 7,000 yards. They're par 72. They have the same grass types. There's two big differences. Number one, Spyglass is more inland than Pebble. You think Pebble's like completely right on the coast. It's actually not. Like there's the 10 to 12 most famous holes for Pebble are right on the coast. The other, 6 to 8 holes are more inland, but Spyglass is almost all inland. But when you look at the rankings every year the tour puts out, once the courses are finished for the season, they rank them both on difficulty, and Spyglass always ranks as more difficult. Almost always ranks as more difficult than Pebble. So, but it's not massive. If the wind forecast was up, then yes, I would say it's probably a bigger edge. Make sure you're playing more Spyglass guy as excuse me, more Pebble. If the wind was up, the advantage that you get from playing Pebble gets completely diminished. So they're more like even. But the wind's going to be down, so I probably would like a little bit more Pebble in my Showdown lineups than Spyglass when I can, because the wind forecast is very minimal this week. It is going to be cold. I don't think they're going to play in anything above 55 degrees for the entire time that they're playing. It's going to be between about 50 and 55, like all day, every day. But yeah, I would, maybe a 4-2 Pebble preference for showdowns would be where I'd end up this year.
Cool. So nowhere near as dramatic as it was last week. And we'll pray that wind forecasts aren't off by 40 miles per hour this
Right.
week to affect our lineups. So, all right, that'll do it for this video. Again, we're trying to do this video all season long, but in order to do that, we have to get at least 1,000 views per video just to make it worth everyone's while. And in order to do that, you can help out. One, subscribe to the channel. It's free to do so. Just click subscribe below this video. You'll get notified when we post our PGA videos every week. You'll get notified when we post our Super Bowl DFS and betting videos, plus any other content we post on the channel. It's mutually beneficial. Give us a thumbs up. The easiest, quickest, freest way to help us out. And also you can do it by dropping a comment. Tell us what you'd like about the show, what you'd like to see in future episodes, questions about this event. We'll happily answer them for you. And then finally, you're already here, but you watch the video to its full length. That also helps. So there's a little 4-step process on how to get more views on YouTube. And if you want to see this video for the rest of the year, you'll do those 4 things. And we appreciate you if you do so. So for Nero, I'm Brian. Check out the Daily Plug tonight. The model is already up and running, and ownership will be updated throughout the next couple of days. So thanks for listening, and good luck, and enjoy Pebble Beach.